Last week, Sony rocked the gaming world, and not in a good way, with an announcement that they would be phasing out physical media production for its console systems by 2028. And the response was swift and brutal. Mockery descended on Sony's head from every corner of the internet and beyond, and rightfully so. But the implications of this move touch on a lot more than just what goes on in the game industry. Let's start with the announcement itself and the backlash. Sony's plan is to stop producing physical discs for new games on PlayStation consoles as of January 2028. This, Sony claims, is in response to, quote, shifting trends in consumer preference. But there's been at least one analysis that disputes this. Quote, Sony's data of 85% of purchases are digital includes purchases for games that only release digitally without a choice of physical. In other words, it looks like Sony's fudging the numbers to reach a preordained conclusion. What's been even wilder is the response to all this, which has been absolutely merciless. And it hasn't been limited to the gaming community either. Domino's Pizza took to social media to roast, or maybe I should say bake, Sony for doing all of this. It makes me think of the old anti-piracy ads. You wouldn't download a pizza, would you? And KFC got in on the act too, pressure cooking Sony good and hard for trying to get consumers to settle for non-physical media when people feel increasingly like they don't own anything anymore. The idea that people will always settle for digital comes at a really bad time. Sony just got busted for mass deleting movies from distributor Studio Canal from their digital library, and with no recourse for consumers left holding the bag. As IGN commented, you cannot trust digital purchases, and you cannot trust the corporations that offer them. People are growing resentful, rightfully so, of the idea that if they spend money on something, they're not really buying it. Even in the enterprise world, the mockery for this lack of control is also rising. GitHub, which is owned by Sony rival Microsoft, let's not forget, is now offering ways for users to obtain copies of their public repositories on CD-ROM, quote, in light of recent developments in physical media. It's a nice idea, actually. But I got to thinking about two possible big implications for all this in the enterprise non-gaming IT world. The first is about ownership. We're, as a whole, very used to the idea that software, especially in the form of services, is licensed and not sold. And a big part of why we're used to that is because one of the big compensations we've had for almost all software not being on physical media these days is the rise of free and open source software as the almost universal default. We don't mind not having a disk because we can keep or make as many copies as we like. Now, that breaks down when we talk about services. If a given service goes offline and its stack isn't easily reproduced via open source, that is a problem. And the rapaciousness of many of these service offerings just gets worse with every passing year. I dare you to find me one person who has nice things to say about Adobe at this point. And the gaming world is wrestling with the implications of service-first software itself in the form of the Stop Killing Games movement, which demands that online games have a mandated offline mode to preserve at least some functionality. But that's a hard thing to guarantee, and it may be all but impossible for smaller game publishers to fulfill. And game developers generally don't have the luxury of open sourcing their stack and assets if they're shut down. But the other big implication I see is how this is one of the ways Sony is coping with the bad new normal. The exploding costs of hardware affects everyone, especially those of us in the enterprise space. So Sony's strategy has been to cut physical media, or at least try to do so, to raise the prices of consoles, to slash jobs, to perform all kinds of other belt-tightening moves. But cutting physical media is one of the most shocking and unexpected of the bunch. It's been something of a given for Sony that physical media for consoles was going to remain a thing. Sony even went out of their way to differentiate themselves aggressively from Microsoft and other competition on this very point some years back. But I guess the new normal doesn't allow for that anymore. So what's going to happen in the enterprise space when the exploding costs of hardware catch up to a business that's now trying to throw more money than ever at data centers for AI inference services? What rug is going to get pulled there? Well, if enterprise IT giants are smart, they'll roll back their investments on AI infrastructure that hasn't even materialized yet, especially as that whole business is showing it has serious limits for what it can provide versus what it can claim. But what troubles me is that they may find things to cut that we haven't even thought of yet. Reducing headcount, closing down whole markets, retreating from specific lines of business, we've already seen all those. The danger is in what we haven't yet seen. Ways for enterprise IT providers to keep more for themselves, give customers less, justify it as a cost-saving measure in an adverse economy, and then bake in those changes as a new normal, all without us being able to see it coming. Enterprises have gotten a little too used to the idea that software is ephemeral, that it's a service that we rent or open code that we pull down and massage into shape. The game world's preservation problem feels like it comes from another reality, but it's a symptom of a problem shared by the gaming and enterprise IT worlds. How resource crunches and societal changes can cause the people who build all the things we depend on to yank the rug out from under us in shocking new ways that severely limit future choices. Gamers may well turn to piracy to do end runs around the death of physical media. What are enterprise IT people going to do in the face of potentially brutal reactions to spiraling hardware and energy prices that could undercut all their assumptions? It's a good question. So that's it for this episode. If you liked it, leave a comment below, and don't forget to follow Dev with Serdar and InfoWorld on Facebook, YouTube, and InfoWorld.com.